We will be sharing the link to the recording on YouTube once it is uploaded by our usual channels. So WYC Weathermark, Facebook, and an email to folks who registered for the event tonight. We have also enabled the live transcription for the session tonight. If you want to turn it off yourself, simply click on the icon that says More with the 3 stacked dots on your Zoom ribbon, and then click Hide Subtitles. And you can turn them back on again if you want to in the same way. Your video and mics will be off during the program. If you have them on now, please turn them off. We ask that you keep them off during the Q&A time at the end, unless you're specifically asked to turn them on by a speaker or a host during the program. It just takes up bandwidth, and we've got a lot that we're trying to share tonight. As I mentioned, there will be a Q&A session at the end of the program. And just so you know, we may continue the Q&A past 8 o'clock if people have more questions. Feel free to put questions in the chat at any time during the session, and the membership committee folks will do our best to get to read them all during the Q&A time. But if you think we've missed them when we get to that point, please feel free to repeat them. And we would just ask that you please hold all live questions to the end. So I failed to introduce myself. I'm Jolene Thibodeau-Boyd. I am on the membership committee. And without further ado, I ask you or invite you to sit back and enjoy tonight's presentation about the delivery from Bayfield to Antigua aboard Quintessence III, a tale so epic that its telling requires 3 speakers, David Crum, Volker Petersen, and Craig A. Smith. Take it away, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can.
All right, very good. I was having a little problem with one of my speakers. So good evening, everyone. This is David Crum here, live from beautiful Antigua. We got Quintessence in the water today. That was a big accomplishment, and I'm going to go through and just kind of give everybody a brief history of the Q. It's a pretty epic program going back to 1979. The boat was originally built for the Brazilian Admirals Cup team, as you see here in this slide, from the Isle of Wight. It also participated in the epic 1979 Fastnet race. Fortunately, Indigo was able to get around Fastnet Rock before it got really ugly, and they made it back without any damage and without any major issues, as opposed to a lot of the smaller boats, which definitely had more problems. Next one, Craig. There we go, perfect. The Q was purchased in 1984 by Charlie Erickson. Charlie was a sailor at Wayzata Yacht Club in the 70s with Quintessence I, which was a Sauerl 26, Quintessence II, which was a North American 40, and finally Quintessence III. When he bought the boat, it had just finished a rebuild after being totaled in the Lauderdale to Key West race, losing its mast. The previous owners to Charlie put a new mast on. Charlie continued the rebuild by putting on 2 different keels, a new rudder, and putting together a team of people that was, for all intents and purposes, family. To sail on the Q, you need a dozen people. And over the years, the Q family expanded into a wide variety of people from all walks of life, and truly was a family program in the bigger sense of the word. Sadly, we lost Charlie Erickson in an airplane crash in 2004. The photo in the upper left there is his Mount Gay hat that we went over and actually recovered from the crash site. Myself and 3 other long-term crew members bought the boat from Charlie's estate in 2004, and I took over full ownership in about 2009, 2010. Next one, Craig. We campaigned in Bayfield. We went down to Chicago for the Chicago Mac. We did multiple Trans-Superiors and Lake Superior offshores. Next one there, Craig. Bayfield was our home. We definitely had a very special spot in our heart for racing up in Bayfield. Next. The boat went through a variety of rebuilds over the years. When I was working as a professional captain over in Europe for about 20 years. Anytime I had some time off, I would come back and, as you'll see in the next slide, make a little fiberglass dust. Nope, I guess we got the crew. More crew over the ages, a bunch of old farts in the upper left corner, Augie, Phil Johnson, myself, and then some of the newer crew from the Trans and just racing up in Bayfield. We tried to open up the boat to anybody that wanted to come up and have a big boat experience. We had my lovely partner, Lisa, who I couldn't do any of this without her. She has been a rock. She has been my mixologist, both with cocktails and with epoxy. This slide on the right are two of my dearest friends from the UK. We're doing the tot on board the Q in Chicago, and Craig in the red shirt is doing the daily reading of this day in British naval history. Probably one of the most epic photos shot by Craig during the Chicago MAC, the final year we were on the Great Lakes. And then projects. The boat had been ridden hard. It had sunk in 1985, which was the result of a big, large breaking wave taking out the steering. And then the second breaking wave rolled the boat and broke the rig. And the boat had gotten pretty much swamped and submerged. The owners prior to Charlie started repairs. Charlie continued with the repairs, and I've been doing repairs ever since. We went through and recorded a good chunk of the hull. Next one, Craig. And a major recore on the bottom, back by the rudder. The gentleman you see here is Charlie Brown up in Bayfield, Wisconsin, a long-term crew member. He is also a shipwright, and Charlie really kind of mentored me in the ways of repairing and rebuilding boats. And without Charlie, a lot of the repairs just wouldn't have been possible. And then we ended up coming up with the idea of finishing the repair project, removing the keel from the boat, bringing it down to John Munson's shop down in Hopkins a few years ago. We cut out a good chunk of the hull, recorded it. We took all the major systems. The lower left corner is the V drive. We basically stripped it down and with the assistance of John Koss, replaced all the bearings, all the seals, all the bearing races, and completely rebuilt every major system with the exception of the engine, which we had repowered the boat with not long after Charlie passed away. So the engine was probably the most reliable piece on the boat. Getting the keel back on required the good folks at Barker's Island to do their magic, and the use of the travel lift and getting the keel line back onto the hull was a couple-day project, but we got the keel back on. And once again, I put on the personal protection equipment and went through and slapped a little more bottom paint on the boat before we put the boat in the water. Go ahead, Greg.
Whoops, why isn't it working?
I don't know. There we go. So that's briefly the history. I'm going to turn it over to Craig to cover the story of the trip across the Great Lakes and the Erie Canal.
So I'm going to take you from Bayfield to the Hudson River in two parts. Part A to Buffalo, we had the crew of four, the three of us, plus our ukulele playing crewmate, Jim Anderson. This is our track, courtesy of Volker's sailing log. All the blue pins indicate harbors where we tied up and spent some time. We did refuel on the Keweenaw and had our finished breakfast, and then on to the Sioux, where you can ask any of us about the story of the alternator whisperer. And then down lake towards Detroit, I'm going to go light on this because Andy covered it very thoroughly last month with his message of priorities, crew, vessel, mission, in that order. And we eventually made it to Buffalo, where the harbor is carved out in the shape of a buffalo. The horns right here on the head are actually a double wide boat ramp you can back your trailer up on. And there were some sights to see: the anchor bar where they invented the original buffalo wings, destroyers, and Here's Jim and his Fowlies asking, one of these things does not look like the others in Niagara Falls.
It's kind of
We
our
had to
Where's
drop-
Waldo picture there, Craigie.
Oh, sorry?
So that's kind of our Where's Waldo picture right there.
Here's Waldo. We needed to drop the mast to get through the canal. We built these wooden frames and lashed it down to the deck. And we left Jim behind in Buffalo. So now it was down to the three, entering the Erie Canal. Growing up out east, the Erie Canal was legendary. So when I heard I had an opportunity to travel every inch of the way, I told David, sign me up for everything, every regatta, every race, every delivery, any opportunity to bail the bilge or haul diesel fuel. So we locked through a total of 34 locks, 18 guard gates, 15 lift bridges, almost 340 miles from Buffalo to Albany. Canal's 12-foot draft, supposedly. We found 3 places that were considerably less. Speed limits vary from 5 to essentially unlimited. Originally derided as Clinton's folly, Thomas Jefferson pronounced it little short of madness. For there were no civil engineers or even schools in the country, in the continent at that time. Built for $7 million starting in 1817, it paid for itself in 12 years. Such a fabulous success, every city wanted it. And even today, all the major cities in New York are on or serviced by the canal. Expanded in 1934 and again in 1905 by channelizing and canalizing the rivers. In this topo in the lower right, you can see the Mohawk River forms a natural break through the Appalachian chains into the Great Lakes, spread along the Finger Lakes, and then it had to surmount the Niagara Escarpment. There's the first control gate we came to. Most of the time they were open. I understand they can close them to service sections of the canal, or if they want to conserve water. So going from west to east, Lockport, the flight of 5, is this Niagara Escarpment of 60 feet, completed in 1849. It was replaced, the 5 locks were replaced with just 2 in 1913. Onto the E-17, the largest drop, over 40 feet, and ending up in the Waterford flight of 5, the lift vessels almost 170 feet from the Hudson River. It's still today the highest elevation gain relative to the length in the world. So Lockport, originally it was in the top left, you see a double set of 5 locks. In 1914, they tore out the 5 on the south, replaced it with 2 large doors, which here you can see the queue locking through. And here's your beauty shot. The 5 on the right, they are trying to restore. I think they've got 3 of them restored. It doesn't do you much good till they all work, but they want to make them working again with wooden doors. Our first stop was in Holly, New York, where there's a Norwegian connection, and the queue was tied up peacefully on the dock. In the background, you can see one of the many lift bridges that they had to raise for us to go underneath. Approaching Rochester, New York, this would not be part of the original canal, chiseled through rock like this. We had to turn back because the Genesee River was so silted in, we couldn't make it across. Coming back to Spencerport, where we waited for our savior, the DeWitt Clinton tugboat. And in the background here, you can see this lift bridge. They were working on it, so it was kind of permanently up. The sign says blow horn before passing under because they were welding such not. So these lift bridges were interesting. On either side, there is a machinery pit that holds the counterweights and the motors. And even when the bridge is up, pedestrians can cross thanks to these stairways. So we were told the Clinton had a 10-foot prop. Looking at this picture in dry dock, I think it might only be a 6-foot prop. Displaces 30 tons of water. The original engine had been refitted with a 350 horsepower by the time she towed the queue through the Genesee. 1926 boat, still the oldest working tug on the canal. So here we are locking down with the Clinton for our second assault on the Genesee River. And we made it to be rewarded the next morning with the beautiful mist rising over the canal. And there were other fine sights, such as the women's rowing team out for their practice on the canal. On the Little Falls, the largest lock on the canal, all the other doors would swing side to side. This one had this guillotine design where this massive white cement counterweight, you can see in the up and down positions here, which you had to go underneath, a little bit scary. All the canals were painted in this blue and yellow livery. This is the first lock we actually had to go up in order to continue going down. They're outfitted with these fancy brass valves to open the gates and the water valves. When we made it to the Mohawk River, it got much more mountainous, and we could see the ruins of the original Erie Canal would be in these cement or stone, sometimes even wooden troughs that carried the boats because the river would have been too rocky to navigate. The Dave Peckinpah is a World War II boat and is being restored as a museum. Last thing you see before you arrive in Waterford. And we made it. And this is my mule. Her name is Sal, 15 miles on the Erie Canal. She's a good old worker and a good old pal. 15 miles on the Erie Canal. So here's where the Champlain Canal takes off. And looking back on the left, you can see the two large doors that the queue came through. And over on the right, what I mistook for just like a spillway, on closer investigation, that is the original Erie Canal. The stonework is carved for the rotating wooden doors that would tuck into these dovetailed notches so they would not block the boats trying to make their way through the canal. So we're out of the canal, onto the Hudson River. We see ships again, quaint lighthouses in the middle of the river. We had a brief haul out at Scarano Boat Yards to inspect the keel, and everything was pronounced good. So we were on our way to Hoppano's, and an old Indian village where they have this antique crane, which was built in St. Paul, Minnesota, according to a plaque on it, where they put our mast up again, and we became a sailboat. This is where I left the boat, and so I'm turning you over now to Volker Petersen for part 3. Are you there, Volker?
Thank you, Craig, and welcome everyone. So the one part that's missing in this is there was another short delivery that David did together with Lisa and her dad, if I recall correctly, to bring the boat from Hoppano's to New York. And then we waited for the insurance to become valid so that we could deliver the boat from New York down to Antigua. That was the game plan. So you see here the picture of the skylight of New York, or here this is the picture from the Marina, Liberty Marina in Newark, just across the river from Manhattan. Our delivery crew, we had Carolyn, Dallas, David, Lynn, and myself on it. So all of us with plenty of experience for passage that we plan to take. And as always for deliveries, there is some time to do some sightseeing. So here are some shots from New York. A couple of the crew even made it to a concert from Bob Dylan. And yes, it was beginning of December, and snow was falling. So what you can see here is a little dusting of snow, but in New York, they call it a snowstorm. And with snow like this and a real snowstorm happening, of course, flights have to be canceled. So one of the effects of this little bit dusting was that FedEx stopped deliveries into Newark, and the satellite radio that was supposed to arrive didn't arrive, arrived a day late. We used the additional time to get the queue ready. We did some prepping on some food and dinners, which really proved to be fortuitous that we had that done. And then came the day of departure. So you can see here, no, go one back, Craig. Dave doing the traditional thank you to Neptune. And there's a shot leaving Liberty Bell Marina and the southern tip of Manhattan, and yeah, queue being ready to leave. And these are the last shots from this trip. The next shots that you will see from the trip are actually when we are in Norfolk. It got a little bit too much to start documenting. So you see here the skyline of, go one back, Craig, please. Skyline of New York, Statue of Liberty, and then Verrazano Bridge, and us heading out underneath Verrazano Bridge. Go on, Craig. So what I show you here is on the left-hand side, the actual course that we sailed. And on the right-hand side, this is actually the grip file. If you look down here, it says 800 days old. When I plotted it out, or when I brought it into the grip viewer. So this yellow line that you can barely see, this would be the normal course heading to Antigua. We made the decision already at departure that we go basically straight south to stay out of the strongest wind. The wind forecast for our departure window that we now had after we had it lay with the sat phone called for winds out of the west at 25 to 30 knots. So that was wind a little bit aft of the beam. We had swell forecast for 10 plus feet and temperatures in the 30s. And we knew that this would last for 2 days until we got into southern latitudes, so that it started to warm up. We left with the first reef in the main, and we only had the first reef set, and we had the number 3 drip up. And I said already, we made the decision, instead of following the rum line on our course, to head south to stay a little bit out of the stronger winds. Watches were really cold and challenging. The boat was racing down the waves at 9, 10 plus knots. And we had, in order to stay warm and preserve energy, we had one person on deck and the second person in complete gear on standby, watching the person on deck from below through the hatch, so that if something would happen, the second person would be immediately on deck. But we only had one person up for, and they were up for 1 hour. Then came the second person on for an hour, and then came the second watch, and that's the way we rotated through. We started to get quite a bit of water into the boat after the, or during the first night already. All but one bunk were wet. We had water coming through the tracks and the ceiling, and we got moisture onto the exhaust of the heater, the space heater, or the heater for the boat. That caused some smoke to get into the boat, which in the end probably contributed that 2 of our crewmates got seasick. So that started to take quite a bit of redundancy out of the crewing. We went from a crew of 5 to a crew of 3. One of the crewmates on top of it got borderline hypothermic. So then we needed to have another person take care of the seasick people. And at the end of the first day, the engine would stop running. We started to get water in the fuel system. So then we were, so we had basically a cascading, let's say, series of events. None or each of them not serious. In combination, they got us to the point that we made the decision to, and we made the decision about here to detour and to head straight to Norfolk and to get everything back into working order. That was a very good decision, a very smart decision. It took us, after we made the decision to detour, it took us over 4 hours to bleed out all the water out of the fuel system. Then it took another 2 hours of work to bleed the engine and get the engine started. And we pretty much got the engine started on the last of the power left in the batteries. And then we could actually get, with the help of the engine, into Norfolk. We were greeted into the harbor of Norfolk by an incoming convoy of, what was it actually? Was it, yeah, it was a submarine, wasn't it? Yeah, submarine with some frigates up in front and back. We were exactly on the channel marker line, and all of a sudden a rip comes next to us and starts shouting at us, get out of the channel. We have right away here, so we had to detour out of the channel to let them by. And this is the morning after we arrived in Norfolk. Yeah, everything needed to be dried out. We steam washed all the cushions that all got waterlogged with salt water, dried up the sails, and then found the root cause of the water coming into the boat, and started to drill out those holes, put fiberglass in it, and to recore everything and get us started. So that's where all of us then ended this delivery and went home for Christmas. And then David got the next set of crew together to then bring the boat, the final leg, from Norfolk to Antigua. And that ends my story, but I don't want to end without stressing again that I think it's very important to observe what happens on your boat in terms of your crew, in terms of your equipment, and to run a list of what's all wrong, to then come to the conclusion that the next small thing that might go wrong might be too much for you to handle. And before that happens, already make the decisions to seek safe harbor instead of pressing on. So I was very happy that Dave did this work and as a skipper made those calls that I think were absolutely appropriate and necessary to guarantee the safety of the crew and the safe arrival of the queue in the end in Antigua. David, you want to take it over?
No, I think it's back to Craig.
Yeah, it's back to Craig. Thank you, Volker. I almost wish I hadn't missed that leg of the delivery.
Oh, you wouldn't wish to miss that.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and thank you, organizers, for making this possible. I'm up again for the Norfolk to Antigua, which became Norfolk to Hispaniola. We started our trip at the Cutty Sark Marina in Norfolk, Virginia, where some of the boats are in very fine condition and others not so much. We had our crew of 4. It was David, myself, Augie Olson, and his friend Alan Renning, a retired pilot who brought his sextant with him. We departed January 14th for Antigua, turned up 9 days later in the Dominican Republic. But to re-emphasize the safety at sea, when we left, we had 2 EPIRBs on board, both registered, a sat phone, Dallas's Garmin tracker, pair of life rafts, and I was wearing a personal AIS beacon. In addition, David had retained professional weather router, Chris Parker. And here's our track, thanks to Dallas's GPS tracker. We knew we'd have to cross the Gulf Stream. Of course, that's a strategic decision. On the way, David had brought this rose from the doctor, Mark Christensen's funeral, which was duly anointed with rum and cast into the Gulf Stream. So our course looked pretty simple, just a straight shot from Norfolk to Antigua, just over 1,400 nautical miles. But the wind went light. We had to heat it up, and we became becalmed in the Turks and Caicos with engine difficulties. Eventually, we made it to this ocean world, casino, harbor. We felt it was more of a Hotel California as we waited for engine parts to arrive. Here's Alan and Augie with the quarantine flag and this the queue tied up to the end of the dock. We washed all the salt off and hang it out in the sun to dry. We had some time to relax. They love to wrap the beers in a Hemingway-esque way with these paper towels. And I had some time to reduce some sight. So these are my brag shots. Best 2-body fix, 23 nautical miles, not bad for a sextant. But my best single body lower limb of the sun, less than a mile. Pretty much luck, I guess. There was some sightseeing to do in Puerto Plata, which means Silver Mountains. Some think there's a connection to the conquistadors and Columbus. Others say, no, it's just the silvery sides of the leaves. There were cable car rides, and the tourists would go out on this catamaran ride. And that's it. David, over to you. David, I think you're still on mute.
I was on mute. Thank you, Craig. And Volker, thank you as well. Once we got the replacement injectors in and paid the necessary fees to the Dominican Republic customs broker, we were underway again. We made a quick stop in the BVIs because we were having some issues with low oil pressure, which just turned out, thankfully, to be a bad sensor unit, and eventually got the boat down to Antigua. We had a short window to get the boat ready for the Caribbean 600. If you want to jump to the next slide there, Craig. We did both the Caribbean 600 and the Heineken Regatta in St. Martin. And we had a great crew for both events. We had just champagne sailing. Next slide, please. Down in St. Martin, everybody had nice housing. We had great sailing conditions. The only real issue we ran into was that the age and the salt and the sun on our number 3 head sail caused it to start to come apart. So we were pretty much getting a day of racing in and then a evening of taking the sail back to the loft to stitch it back together to go out and race the next day. After we finished the Heineken Regatta, the plan was for Lisa to come down at the end of March and help me deliver the boat down to Antigua in early April to ultimately do Antigua Sailing Week. But then we had a little problem with this thing called COVID. They started closing the borders while we were still in St. Martin. I proceeded to finally decide to just single hand the boat a little over 100 miles from St. Martin down to Antigua. Got into Antigua about 12 hours before the borders were closed, and they put a 24/7 curfew in place. So I was stuck living by myself on the queue for just about 3 months, and eventually they did open up the restrictions, but if you've been on board the queue, while a comfortable boat for a race boat, it's still pretty Spartan. And with everybody trying to figure out a way to get the hell out of Antigua and get back home in the time of COVID, I had the battle of my insurance company still thinking I'm going to bring the boat back north of Cape Hatteras for hurricane season. And it took 2 months of arguing with the insurance company before they finally wrote me a very expensive hurricane policy. The photo you see here is actually where the boat was tied up in Jolly Harbor, where we are right now. Ultimately, we did get the boat hauled out of the water, and my insurance company wanted the mast out of the boat. So we had to pull the mast out and get that all secured. And I finally got back to the States in early June. So from mid-March through early mid-June, I was pretty much locked down on the boat. Since then, I've made 2 trips back to Antigua. April of last year, I came down to do a couple of projects on the boat and was able to work with a surveyor that I knew to get a good survey on the boat, which resulted in a much more affordable and better coverage insurance policy through a local agent. And so we got the insurance sorted out. And then when I came down in November, proceeded to do a little pre-planning for this year's season. When I came back down here now in January, it became quickly apparent that the mast needed a lot of work. The exposure to the UV deteriorated a lot of the line control systems for the spinnaker pole. The messenger lines that we put in for the halyards had deteriorated and broken down, so we ended up having no lines to pull the halyards back through, and the mast was in desperate need of a paint job. So made the decision to cancel racing for the 2022 season and concentrate on getting the mast ready, getting the boat ready. As I mentioned at the beginning, we actually got the boat launched today, and Lisa's down here with me with another friend. We're going to go and get the mast sorted out, and with any luck, we'll get the mast back in the boat sometime the end of next week, and maybe even go out and do a little day sailing. I decided to cancel the Antigua Sailing Week family commitments in early May. Made it just too tough to be able to do the sailing week and get the boat hauled out here in Antigua for hurricane season and make it home in time for family commitments. So long story short, no racing this year, but we're going to go and put a program together for 2023 that'll include the 600. It'll be the Heineken Regatta, followed after that by BVI Regatta, and then finishing up again with Antigua Sailing Week. So I'll be looking for crew. If you see me at Wayzata this summer, track me down if you want to come down and do some racing in the Caribbean. My email address is in the membership log. Reach out to me if you've got any interest. We'll see if we can put something together for you. Greg, Volker, thank you very much for helping me do this. Membership committee asked me to do this back in January, but I was kind of overwhelmed with boat projects, and through Volker and Craig's help, we pulled off a good one, I think, gentlemen. Well done. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And under time.
Did we really?
Well, it's
5 minutes to spare.
1940.
There we go.
Oh yeah, Q&A.
So yeah, let's open it up for Q&A if anybody has a question.
So if folks have questions, you can type them into the chat and we'll read them, or you can turn your cameras and microphones on and ask questions live if you'd like. First question, why are there so many pictures of Volker?
I didn't pick the pictures.
I'm
I-
probably
All
not
right.
because I took a lot of them.
Next question is, why do you want to be in Antigua?
Antigua is a very special place for me over the years. When I was working professionally, it was kind of my base of operations. I'm very well connected in with the local racing community. I'm a member of an obscure British drinking society called the Royal Naval Yacht Club of Antigua and Barbuda. And they were instrumental in helping me find the surveyor, insurance. So part of it boils down to just the people that help you get stuff done. And Antigua is a great place to get that done. I was a bit remiss in my final bit. I do have two other people to thank for the delivery from the BVIs or from Costa Rica, from Dominican Republic, sorry, down to BVIs. Eric Bowen helped me double hand the boat from DR down to BVIs, and then Steve Palm flew down to BVIs and helped me bring the boat down to Antigua. So didn't have much photos from that part of the adventure. So my apologies to both Eric and Steve for not mentioning them sooner. So let's see who else we got for questions here. Kim, you wanted to know about a weather person. The guy that we chose, I've worked with a number of weather routers over the years. Mark Mickelson from, he has a company called III-WYC, which makes all of our Q crew wear, is a great weather router, probably one of the best in the business. He was badly overbooked and pretty expensive. So Chris Parker has a great reputation, and the program was basically an email from Chris every day, letting us know, what we're to expect for weather in the area that we were, and give us some advice on waypoints to steer to. Super helpful, kept us out of trouble, and it was definitely a good thing to have on any kind of a long distance trip if you've got the communications tools to be able to keep a weather router in your employ. Chet, total nautical miles, end of the day, about 2,200. And the obscure drinking club was closed down, but some of us youngsters got them to fire up the tot every day, 6 p.m. via Zoom. So we had multiple Zoom happy hours every day, both the tot club, and then Lisa was instrumental on putting together family and friends. So my time sitting on the boat wasn't totally wasted. We had a nice evening cocktail hour between the tot club and the Zoom happy hour back home. Let's see, what else do we have here? Total head count. We had 4 of us for Lake Superior through the Erie Canal. We lost, Jim stepped off in Buffalo, so it was Volker, Craig, and I for the Erie Canal. And then there were 5 of us down to the Dominican Republic, 2 of us from the Dominican Republic to BVIs. I did find a local person in the BVIs to help Steve Palm and I get down to Antigua. We stopped in St. Kitts, and Lisa and Adam Annis flew from Antigua down to St. Kitts and joined us on the final 70-mile upwind slog in about 25 knots of breeze and big seas from St. Kitts up to east to Antigua. What kind of exercise? 12-ounce curls is what I pretty much did during lockdown. Other than that, not much. You couldn't get off the boat. You couldn't walk. You couldn't really go anywhere. I got 1 hour of time in the shower to go to the shower, and 1 day a week to go to the grocery store. And that was in the morning on Thursdays. Let's see what else. How long is the lag time in getting par? Oh, Gordon, great question. Depends on how much you want to spend. Normally it's a couple of weeks. There is a company called Kess based here in Antigua that has an office in Fort Lauderdale. And a friend of mine down here from the Tot Club has an account with Kess, so I can ship Amazon to his account and they will repackage it, put it on a plane at the cost of $10 a pound and ship it down here. And I can usually get stuff within 3, maybe 4 days from the States, which for lightweight stuff, for, you know, electronic parts, that works great. You don't want to ship an anchor at $10 a pound, that's for sure.
David, I recall when we were stuck in the Dominican Republic, you opined that you could have flown back to the United States, bought 4 fuel injectors, and flown back faster and for less money than it eventually cost.
That is very true, Craig. That is very true. Let's see what else we got for questions here. Would I do it again? Yeah, I've been very blessed with a lot of opportunity from a lot of boat owners over the last 30 years that have gotten me many seasons over in Europe and down here in the Caribbean. I love offshore and I love the people down here. I love sailing down here. Would I do it exactly the same way as we did it? No. It was probably the toughest delivery I've ever done. But I've also done this delivery with Champlain sailing the entire way. So it really is just, a matter of luck as to, who you got for crew and what you got for weather. You basically roll the dice both ways. I've been very blessed with having really good people hanging out with me over the years of sailing. And we've been able to go through and do some pretty great deliveries for all the different boats that I've worked on over the years.
David, I think it was after the 12 hours that we were hard aground in Utica, you said you'd never do the Erie Canal again. And not to put anyone off, this is the cruising guide, which anyone can have, and I might even be available.
Yeah, the Erie Canal, I'll have to admit, I will probably not do again on a boat that draws as much water as the Q. While they say it's a 12-foot controlled depth, they lie. And long story short, if I ever do this trip again, it'll be an adventure down the St. Lawrence Seaway. Gordon, yes, we did have a brief period of time getting stuck in the wind hole off of Guadalupe, but we used our Bayfield experience. We went to the beach and took thermals off the shoreline. The water stays pretty deep right up to the beach. Where we got into a bit of a problem of light wind was once we turned the corner on the south end of Guadalupe, there was very light wind and a foul current, and it was a real struggle to be able to get up by Marie Gallant and then get around the southeast corner of Guadalupe before we finally got back into better wind to be able to continue racing. It was definitely, for every boat, I don't care if you're on a Volvo 70 or on Comanche or Scorpios, you roll the dice around the corner at Guadalupe. So it's kind of the big reset of the entire event. Barb, do I plan on bringing the Q back to Bayfield at some point? Never say never, but right now my original plan was to do 3 years of racing down here. Like everybody else, COVID made a mess of things. Having the boat sitting on the hard for 2 years definitely didn't do the boat any favors. So this has been spent just getting the boat ready to roll. We'll do another year of 2023 of racing, and then I might put the boat up on the market. I may stay a couple more years down here, and who knows, maybe I will bring it back to Bayfield. Right now, it's not my plan. Let's see, Beth, great question. Biggest challenge. The trip from Newark down to Norfolk with Lynn and with Carolyn and Volker and myself, that was, I mean, we got on the edge of the Gulf Stream. We ended up having, as Volker well put together, tough weather, getting seawater into the fuel tank because of a broken vent hose. That messed up everything, because once we didn't have the furnace, we couldn't keep people warm. Once people started getting cold, then they started getting seasick. And as they tell you during the safety at sea training, it's not one thing that gets you into trouble in situations like this. It's a compounding, a building series of events that, all the problems come together, and now you have a problem. So a lot of credit to everybody on that trip for keeping their wits about them, and ultimately making the decision to go into Norfolk and trying again after we got our water leak problem solved and got everything dried out. That was pretty much a no-brainer at that point, but it was definitely a tough challenge.
I think there were a lot of challenges on this trip, and the only reason why the boat is where it is because of Dave's determination. I mean, there were times on the Erie Canal where I just wondered what kept him going.
Stubbornness. I like, I don't want to put it. I love sharing the sport of sailing and the adventure of offshore, and it had been a dream of mine for 20 years after Charlie died to get the boat back into good shape. And I've been, running other people's boats down here in the Caribbean and over in Europe and up in Scandinavia. And I really wanted to take my boat down and do some proper racing in the big breezes that you get down here. No disrespect to Bayfield. It's a beautiful place to race, but your typical summers are pretty light winds. Down here, you've got 20 to 25 blowing all the time. You can't beat the racing down here. It's warm. Yeah, the salt is a little bit of a pain, but it's just great racing down here. Question for all three of you, a personal highlight. Volker, you want to toss something out?
Well, for me, it was just being lucky to be part of this trip and to experience most of this trip myself. So that's for me the highlight overall. And if there's a second highlight, then the happy hours where Craig always had the best drinks coming.
Oh yeah.
I'd have to say the Erie Canal, a childhood fantasy of mine, but right after that would have been the ukulele and the beer puppet, Jim.
And for me, that's a really, really tough question. Being stuck down here with the borders closed and the curfew in place, I can't call it a highlight, but it was a personal challenge. It was adversity unlike anything I'd ever experienced, and I overcame it, and I was able to not go completely and totally insane. Some people might doubt that, but at the end of the day, I made it through what some people think is, oh great, you got stuck on your boat down in the Caribbean during COVID. Well, if you had a luxury yacht, that's one thing, but the Q is not quite a luxury yacht, and it was a real challenge. And through the efforts of Lisa and everybody back in the cities to keep me connected with what's going on via Zoom happy hours, that was a growth experience for me that I never, in my life thought I'd ever have an experience such like I did. Gordon, no. Let's see, the WYC Burgee in Antigua and St. Martin were probably from the days of Chuck Hines's program Hindsight, a sister ship to the Q, 45 feet long rather than 60. We did 1999 through 2004 on Hindsight. We went over to Europe. We spent a few years racing up in Scandinavia, did the ARC race, and then after that we were down here in the Caribbean for one season, and then Chuck was pretty big about sharing the Burgee at every yacht club we went to. We took Hindsight down to Grenada because Chuck's insurance was going to cover him for hurricane season. And then, of course, promptly right after we hauled the boat out for hurricane season, 4 months later, Hurricane Ivan goes through as a Category 5 across the south coast of Grenada and totaled Hindsight. So, you know, we tried. Let's see, Scott is on. Thank you, Scott. That's very kind of you. It takes a village, and Scott, with your team over at West, you guys were, you know, able to get me parts and pieces through hook and by crook sometimes that I never thought was possible. So thank you, Scott, for what you and your team over at West did to help me out over this. It was really, really good. Craig, good question. The alternator whisperer. We ran into this guy in Sault Ste. Marie as we were coming off of Lake Superior. We have two alternators on the engine. One's just a standard alternator. The other is a high amperage alternator. And we were breaking bolts to secure the alternator and going through drive belts. And we just connected up with this random person who happened to have pretty much a mini machine shop in his boat. And he got me hooked up with a better alignment of the alternator, and he definitely was the alternator whisperer. We haven't had any problems since. Greg, this one's for you. Should beer puppeteering be an activity at Race Week?
Oh, I think so. Jim, I think we're going to need to deputize you as the only one with experience in this art form, sport.
It's an art form, but yeah, I think it's like figure skating. There's a bit of both. There's the artistry of it as well as the technique and the competition.
Well, Jim, the Q was instrumental over the years back before my time on the Q, bringing both quarter horse racing and condom racing to Bayfield. And I think there you go, the beer puppeteer. Your contribution, Jim, for Race Week is on the video that Craig just put up. So
I'll try to
put together the system, and we'll make it part of Race Week this year.
Sounds good.
Here we go. A quick way to fill a beer on yourself.
That's the idea. But Jim, you seem to have a knack at this. I don't think you had previous experience with this contraption.
No previous experience. It's just something I found on the ground and tried it on.
And the Heineken distributors were happy to provide you with the raw materials.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Looks like
70 questions on us here.
yeah, Sue wants to know if you're doing an Olympic event.
If Olympic beer drinking, that one will defer.
Craig, can we get some sound on this one?
Oh yeah, let me rewind it.
So before you start it up, Craig, at the Heineken Regatta, as you come in under the bridge, there's this lift bridge, and you go right past St. Martin Yacht Club. And as you're coming back in at the end of day of racing, everybody does a little shtick to impress all the people that are standing at the yacht club. Somebody came up with the idea of putting up signs with your score on it. And Jim brought his ukulele down, and we came up with a little song.
Backside rules the Navy. Backside rules the sea. If you want to build a bomb, better get it from your chum. You get no bomb from me. Now
7 points is clearly a low ball, but in their defense, we were a new boat, and I don't think they really appreciated the artistry of
And
the
in the, what, 3 days of buoy racing there, 7 points is the highest score we got. So thank you, Craig A., for bringing that song into the repertoire of tunes we were doing. Since I'm unmuted, I will have to say that the Caribbean 600 and Heineken Race Week was one of the funnest experiences I've ever had in my life. And thank all three of you for being a part of it. And Dave, you for making it happen.
Well, as I said, 2023, we're going to hit it hard. We're going to go back and do the 600, which if you want to join us, that'd be great. Just bear in mind, you definitely have to have some offshore experience for the 600. Heineken Regatta and BVI Regatta and Antigua Sailing Week. We're definitely open to anybody that's done a little bit of big boat racing. At the end of the day, we'll pretty much take pretty much anybody that wants to come down, because truly it's all about sharing the love of the sport and getting more people exposed to other racing venues off of our home waters.
All right. Anyone else have any last questions before we wrap things up? All right, Barb, do you want to close us?
Well, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Wow. That certainly was an epic journey, gentlemen, and with the pandemic to boot on that. Beautiful boat, Dave. Amazing leadership and persistence, I have to say. I just am impressed. From New York onward, though, I held my breath a little bit for you guys, wondering how, what you were going to say, how that ended up. But I feel like I learned more from the three of you than I did in any history class. So I learned a lot. So nice touch on the singing too, Craig A. But so thank you to all three of you. And I think Jolene has some slides she's going to pop up there. I'm not sure the right order of them, but there is still one more Wanderlust coming up, and is it coming up, Jolene? I wasn't sure. There we go. Cool. All right. So there is Mike Euler in April. So we have one more before we get on our boats. April 12th, there it is. So tune in for that great program. Sign up for that. Also, we had a great happy hour last week at the Muni, and the next one is going to be at Baja House. And so that's kind of, there'll be more happy hours after that, but the official winter happy hours has one more run next month. And then as far as I think, what do you have up next there, Jolene? Talking just about if you want to learn more, some of you are tuned in for sailing for the first time or getting to know our club. We have a new member meet and greet on Thursday the 28th. So that'll be back at the club. And then just know that this was brought to you by the membership committee, and we are looking for more creative, energetic folks to join our team. So if you have interest, it says the website there or the email to reach out to us. So thank you, everyone. It was a balmy night out there, but it's nice that you stuck with us till the end. All right, that's a wrap.